A lot of times I meet clients whose attachment styles lean towards either anxious or disorganized, and they come ask me how can they act unbothered in front of a person whose attachment style typically looks like that of an avoidant, where they can maybe seem unfazed on the surface by whatever is happening, especially during a conflict, or they can walk off and my clients would feel the urge to also pretend to be really cool in front of such people and circumstances. So, how do you act unbothered? Let's talk about it today, but we'll use a very interesting example. So, imagine that you have a closet, right? You have a closet and you have a limited storage space. Now, let's say in that storage space, you can only store 10 items at a time, right? Let's say you went out shopping, you got 10 more items. How would you store it in that limited space? Maybe you would, fold your clothes and other items a certain way. You would try to stuff things until a certain point, and then if there's more space, maybe you could store it in your bed, etc., right? But there is going to come a time where you're going to run out of storage space. And maybe somewhere in the back of your head, you know that there is time to declutter. You cannot postpone it any longer. Especially if you wish to bring in more items, but instead of doing that, instead of dealing with that task of decluttering, you decide to shop and bring in more items. So what's going to happen? You can pretend that you have space, but just because you're pretending doesn't mean that you've dealt with what has to be dealt with. So now let's go back to the example of pretending to be unbothered. See, either you have to be a master manipulator to make someone believe that you're unbothered, but you cannot lie to yourself, right? Like some emotions, just like that pile of clothes, you can push them to a certain extent, but when your cup is full, things will come out, right? So what I'm trying to say is that in order to start being unbothered truly, first you have to declutter. Meaning the emotions that you already have, first you have to acknowledge them. And you don't necessarily need witnesses for these emotions to acknowledge them. You can admit it to yourself in the safety of your own, let's say, private space. You can say that, yes, I think that this person really stirs up my insecurities. I think that when I'm faced with XYZ situation, my anxiety comes up a lot more compared to other situations. And after you acknowledge these emotions, try telling yourself that your response is adequate or normal in the face of that circumstance. And it often is the case. Sometimes we are trying to respond to someone in our head who, once made us feel that maybe our emotions are inappropriate. And that's mostly not the case from what I've seen with my clients. Their emotions, let's say their fear, their sorrow, their grief is very appropriate and adequate in response to those situations. Step 3 is to self-regulate and think from the position of a person who is secure, right? Ask yourself, if I was a more secure person, would I be responding to a situation in the same manner as I did or would have had I not acknowledged the emotions to myself? So a secure person doesn't necessarily act unbothered, right? If their feelings have been hurt, if they are feeling insecure, they would communicate it and also expect the person in front of them to respond in a mature manner. So step 1, acknowledge. Step 2, normalize the emotion for yourself. And then step 3, self-regulate and act from the position of a person who is secure. I hope this helped and I'll see you next time. Bye.